It's probable, possibly, likely. And given Traverse City's long history of industrial, who knows what,
Right.
it wouldn't surprise me if there may be an environmental factor.
Michigan has a prosperous history of economic development and industrial innovation. It began in the mid-18th century with the lumber industry. The forest of the Upper Peninsula rebuilt Chicago after the Great Fire in the 1870s. Ironically, in the same year, the lumber industry also produced its own fire in the wake of the harvest. The first claimed 2 million acres, the second, 1 million. Thousands lost their lives. Many more were permanently displaced. Wood smoke from these fires produced gases that are dangerous and even fatal. Rutene, creosote, and phenol can create health problems that endure far past the last ember. By 1889, over 95% of the state's virgin forests had been leveled. The Forest Commission and its conservation proposals are abolished by the state legislature, and $2.5 billion in profits are made by private interest. At one point, Michigan produced 95% of the nation's copper. This fueled industrial production that devoured the state's resources, and again, created massive wealth for very few. The byproduct of mining is stamp sand.
Workmen often call them widowmakers.
Crushed rock that has no commercial value but contains trace metals that leach into groundwater and waterways. Stamp sand sites have rendered several waterways dead. 1899 saw the production of the first automobile manufacturing plant in Jackson, Michigan. The assembly line, often attributed to Henry Ford, was first patented by Ransom E. Olds in 1901, 7 years before Ford gave birth to it. It would set the standard for mass production worldwide. The environmental impact would be devastating. With the onset of this production speed came little or no oversight into the management of waste products. Slag, solvents, oil, gas, and raw paint were routinely dumped directly into water sources. Whole islands were sold to corporations to be used as dumping grounds, then turned into multiple-unit blast furnaces, flooding the sky with soot. The materials required to build a car is not an easy list to navigate. Metal, rubber, paint, wire, oil, brake fluid, fabric, plastic, steel, aluminum, leather, batteries, porcelain, gas, solvents, cleaners, adhesives, and windshield wiper fluid, all manufactured in their own respect and require packaging, shipping, and cleanup. The most important component? People. The higher the demand for production, the more workforce was needed. Hundreds of thousands of people moved to Michigan. World War II demanded more from the industry. Switching to tank and aircraft production, the factories ran non-stop. The urgency which accompanies life during wartime would lend to a loosening of already vague and malleable environmental guidelines. The 1950s showed no sign of slowing. Michigan quickly became the world leader in automobile manufacturing. The machine had reached its pinnacle. It would stay there for the next 30 years. Michigan companies would start making chemicals that later would be found to be extremely dangerous, even fatal. Dow Chemical produces materials for water purification, pharmaceuticals, paper coatings, paint, and advanced electronics. It also makes Agent Orange and breast implants, both famous for exploding. Its vision under the current CEO, to be the largest, most profitable chemical company in the world. The effects began accumulating. In the 1960s, the Rouge River was one of 3 to catch fire due to large amounts of oil on its surface. Coal-fired power plants released 2,462 pounds of mercury into the air each year in Michigan. This contributes to the contamination of the fish population. The fruit industry brought tons of toxic pesticide runoff into our soil and groundwater. Pesticides, which were originally designed for chemical warfare and are known to cause neurological dysfunction, are still used to this day. 4 Superfund sites in the Grand Traverse area were identified throughout the 1980s. The overall supply site, where TCEs and PCEs found their way to residential and school wells, and Cedar Lake. The Tar Lake site, where Antrim Iron Company used the local pond as a personal waste dump for 64 years. Heavy metals and phenols traveled 3 miles into drinking water. The metal working site, where 400 gallons of heavy metal solutions were routinely dumped over 3 years, affecting at least 1,100 people. And less than 3 miles from Lori's house, the Avenue E site, where at least 30 residential wells were contaminated with benzene, toluene, methyl ethyl ketone, xylene, and acetone. The culprit? The U.S. Coast Guard. These don't include the NREPA contamination sites or leaking underground storage tanks that surround downtown and the Boardman River. More than 2 centuries of loosely monitored pollution has left Michigan ranking number 5 in the top 10 of America's most hazardous states. And in February of 2008, the CDC admitted to withholding and underreporting toxic levels in the Great Lakes. 26 areas of concern were identified. 13 of those were in Michigan, affecting more than 9 million people.
Here's something else to consider.